What if the key to achieving your best result ever was to leap before the net appeared and go left when everyone else is telling you to go right? That, my friends, is what we'll be diving into in today's episode. Welcome to the Mystery School of Manifestation, where we cannot stop talking about the eerie and awe-inspiring connection between all things physical, metaphysical, and mystical, and the magic of manifestation. My name is Debb Cobb, and I am obsessed with teaching you how to defy the odds and stop the self-sabotage so you can step fully into your version of heaven on earth while you're still able to enjoy it in the physical. Now, this podcast is going to be raw and unfiltered, and I'm more than a little controversial at times. My language can be explicit too, so be warned if you're easily offended or have children in the room when you listen. That said, I hope you're ready to buckle up your seatbelt, jump on the roller coaster ride that has been my spiritual and entrepreneurial journey, and grab some tissues, your journal, and favorite crystal, and get ready to start collapsing timelines to step into your version of happily ever after. Welcome to episode 2. I'm so honored that you decided to join us today. Now, when I was growing up, I was the kid who always wanted to know why. Why something had to be a certain way, why something was a certain way, or why I had to do anything that my parents, teachers, or other authority figures told me that I had to. Because I said so just didn't cut it for me. And so I often ended up with marks on my report cards for talking too much or landing myself in in-school suspension for questioning rules I just didn't agree with because they restricted my freedoms. I dropped out of high school because they forced me to take out my tongue ring, for example. And in hindsight, it wasn't the most effective way to create change. And I was really just looking for an excuse to drop out. But as is so often the case, my rebellious nature has its benefits as well, especially when it came to quitting my corporate career in 2017, trading in a stable salary with benefits to go out on my own path. As it turns out, being a rule breaker works out perfectly in entrepreneurship. And from my experience, it is always the rebel in me that strikes gold and creates breakthroughs and manifestations beyond what I would have ever thought possible. It's going against the rules that everyone else says that you have to follow to be successful that works best for me. For example, I've worked for myself now for 8 years. I've never run an ad, with the exception of boosting one Facebook post with a $50 budget. I've never paid for promotion. I'm not consistent on social media. I show up when I feel inspired to, and I often take 3 to 6 month hiatuses to really go within and focus on my inner work and connecting with the divine. I have created exactly 2 opt-ins, and I wait until I receive clear guidance before I ever create a new offer. Now, I'm not going to lie, it's scary pausing and waiting for clear guidance from this invisible thing I call spirit, and then leaping into the unknown, going against what is logical and without a safety net. But what's even harder than waiting on an invisible force to show you the way is explaining it to all of your well-meaning, but often close-minded friends and family, which is really why this podcast even exists, to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to see with your faith and not with eyes, to go against the logical on a feeling, and selfishly to clap back at anyone who has underestimated me over the years. Not to be mean or rub it in their faces, because truthfully, if it wasn't for the naysayers, I'd have had no one to prove wrong and would most likely have listened to the negative voices in my head and given up a long time ago. So, to all of you who have called me crazy, talked about me behind my back, laughed in my face, or told me I couldn't do something, thank you for playing the role of the villain so I could play the role of the hero in my own story. And it's never too late to change sides. That said, every single time I have waited on the divine, which I call spirit or God, to show me the way has always appeared. But just like water doesn't magically transform its state from water to vapor without changing its vibration, the way forward doesn't appear until you change yours. Every single time I create a new offer or decide to pivot in my business, it is because I went within and asked for guidance on what to create. And it never fails that within 24 or 48 hours, someone reaches out to me and asks me if I offer the very thing I just created without me taking any physical action to reach out to them. Now, I still took action, but the action I took was following guidance and creating said offer. Now, there are so many marketers online who will tell you that if you build it, they will come isn't a viable marketing strategy. And to that, I say, just because it hasn't worked for you doesn't mean it doesn't work. Now, that's not to say that I'm saying you don't market your business, but it is to say that I don't believe it's what you're doing that creates your results. And so long as you believe that it is what you do and what you do alone that creates your results, your work will be yours and yours alone. As you reenact the age old story of the original curse as told in the book of Genesis, a story that has permeated Western culture for hundreds of years. You know, the one that says, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field." Now, I'm not here to tell you whether or not I believe that the story actually happened, but just like any other story, there is a message in the making, a lesson or a moral to the story. And the message that I take from the story of the Garden of Eden is not that Adam and Eve were cursed by God for eating a fruit they weren't supposed to eat before they even understood the difference between right and wrong. But what I take from the story is that they judged themselves as unworthy and hid who they really were long before God ever got back from wherever it is that he was. The best part, in my humble opinion, is that being naked wasn't bad until they deemed it so. Otherwise, why were they allowed to hang out in the Garden of Eden naked before God came back? It would seem that worthiness is an arbitrary standard of judgment created by humans for humans, but that's another topic for another day. The point is, there are many, many ways to interpret the same story. And typically, we just accept the version we hear most often, or the one told by people who have power over us in one way or another. And I'm here to show you a different interpretation or way, one where you follow your own intuition and base it on your own experience so that you can co create your own results so far beyond what everyone else is doing, it's impossible to ignore them. But make no mistake, my results are not a result of my hard work alone. My hard work is a byproduct of following my passion or following my bliss, as the great Joseph Campbell once said. Because the kingdom of heaven is within, and to enter it, one needs to see through the eyes of a child, which does not mean that you're supposed to blindly obey a God who demanded that human beings obey laws without even possessing a level of consciousness to tell them the difference between right or wrong. To me, the entire gospel is saying that it is our imagination that creates. And who among us has the best ability to imagine a world beyond the one that currently exists? A child. And the people who are brave enough to listen to the stirrings of their own imagination, even when they're responsible, upstanding adults around them, call them crazy. From my experience, every one of us has the ability to receive divine guidance directly from Spirit and the power to co-create their version of heaven on earth now. Now, wouldn't that be good news? But you don't have to take my word for it. Just like anything else, you can't know for sure unless you try it on. But sadly, manifestation practices and teachings have followed the same path as the gospel did and have been reduced to a bunch of practices to be sold to the masses as the answer. False idols, Moses would have called them. If you say this 55 times, or if you push down your feelings that you don't like, or if you raise your vibration and make a list of all the things that you want and you just imagine them long enough, you will attract everything you want to you. That's pretty much how it goes, which is only partly true. It's not the actions that create, and copying what works for others is akin to spiritual plagiarism. It doesn't work consistently because it's inauthentic. So why do some methods work for some people and not others? Or why did they work when you first started your manifestation journey only to stop working? Which is a great question. Because it was never the action that created the result. It is the embodiment of the truth that activates and attracts what you need to align with your highest good. To assume that we are the only beings that possess consciousness isn't just arrogant, it's wrong. To assume because our natural senses perceive reality a certain way means that it is the truth is literally why our ancestors believed that the sun revolved around the earth, because it sure looked that way, didn't it? Imagine just a couple hundred years ago, if you had told your family that you could see bugs crawling all over everything, they'd have locked you up at the very least, heavily medicated you, and lobotomized you at the worst. And yet, today's microscopes show us that there are indeed bugs crawling all over everything. And what about hallucinations? I'm fully aware that the medical model of psychiatry asserts that hearing voices and seeing visions means that you're mentally ill and need to be on medication. And I am not a licensed anything. So this is my opinion and for pure entertainment purposes only, and also based on just my anecdotal evidence alone for now. That said, I agree. Sometimes seeking medical treatment is the best course of action. Like when I'm in pain, I take pain medication. But I don't assume because the pain medication stopped the pain that the root cause is handled. And like physician and trauma expert Gabor Mate says, a diagnosis is just descriptive. It doesn't tell you the cause. And so just blindly believing that other consciousnesses don't exist because it can't be perceived with our physical senses is the same thing as saying that radio waves aren't real because we can't perceive them with our physical senses either. However, can't we just change the radio station if we don't like the music? Blowing up the receiver doesn't change the fact that the radio waves still exist and are around us all the time. All of that to say, to those of you wondering if manifestation is just wishful thinking or who are considering giving up on your quote unquote crazy dreams, this podcast is for you. From my experience, learning how to receive guidance from the non-physical and then taking action on it, or leaping before the net appears, is the key to achieving results others around you might deem impossible. It's the difference between manifesting stuff and manifesting spirit. But it is important to check in with your own intuition and not just blindly follow others off of a cliff. Don't leap out of fear, but because you feel called to. It's the difference between running away from something or running towards something. If you aren't sure whether your guidance is your intuition, ask yourself, does the idea of doing this fill me with any one of the so-called fruits of the spirit? Meaning, does it feel like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, or self-control? Those are the fruits of the spirit that Jesus told his followers would signal to them, right, that they were in alignment with the gospel. Now, whether or not you believe the gospel isn't really what I'm speaking about here. It's following your intuition. It's checking in with how it feels when you imagine taking that action. Or ask yourself, are you wanting to take a leap of faith because you're afraid of something? So you're running from it. And from my experience, you want to deal with that fear first. My favorite exercise to overcome fear is Tim Ferriss's TED Talk about fear setting versus goal setting. It's incredibly powerful. So I recommend looking at that first and completing that exercise before you take a leap. All of that to say, in order to achieve extraordinary results, you need to use extraordinary methods. And I know this to be true from personal experience because everything I have manifested has resulted from this premise. It's my special sauce. It's how I break records. And it's how I break with the rules, standards, and norms and create results so far beyond the norm that there's nothing else to explain them. Extraordinary simply means, again, outside of the norm. So if you want results beyond what you've created or what has been done before, you need to do something that hasn't been done before. Now, this doesn't always mean that your methods need to be special or expensive or complicated. A good rule of thumb when you're trying to do something that has never been done is to consider doing the exact opposite of what you have done or what is currently being done. Now, this isn't always the magical answer, but I find that starting at the polar opposite is a great exercise to think beyond what you've already thought, which is exactly what happened when I secretly launched my new program, the Mystery School of Manifestation, earlier this year. And it's why I launched this podcast in January and then took like 4 months off, but I digress. I knew I wanted to do something very different than I'd seen done before. And I did not want to have to rely on social media ads or posting consistently because that just doesn't align with who I am. So I set about trying to figure out how we were going to launch without relying on social media at all. But you can't launch without social media. The part of my brain responsible for keeping me safe and fitting in with the crowd argued. Well, why not? You hosted your most successful event to date without it, argued the part of my brain that argues against anything the other parts of my brain suggest, replied. And I remembered there was a time when I did something very differently that was very successful. I had decided I wanted to do something very different to celebrate my daughter Alethia's 16th birthday party. And at the time, I knew how fickle teenagers were, and I was afraid that no one would show up. And so the idea occurred to me, why not design a birthday party around a Hollywood event? Because she wanted to be an actress and still does, right? She still is in that world. However, because she was interested in theater and most of her friends were in theater, I thought, why not throw a Hollywood themed party? And so that's exactly what I did. But in order to get everyone to attend and be talking about it and create this huge buzz around it, I decided I wasn't going to tell anyone where it was going to be at all. All I told them was that it was Hollywood themed, to dress in Hollywood glamour, and to be there 30 minutes before I was going to have Alethea arrive, because we had a red carpet and I had everyone line up, and she was actually blindfolded when she arrived at the venue. Now, the reason why everyone wanted to come was because they had no idea where it was going to be held or what we were going to be doing. And in order to even get access to the location, they had to email a special email that I had created, Alethia's 16th birthday party. I didn't tell anyone where the event was going to be held, even the person driving her, until the day of, an hour before the event started. And you know what? It was packed. Literally, everyone who was invited came, and people were asking her how to get on the invite list. It is literally the party of her high school career. People still talk about it to this day. And it was hands down the most fun I've ever had. So why not do something similar? I thought. And so I did. I was launching a membership with the name Mystery in the title after all. And so we kept everything a mystery. We didn't use any social media. We didn't use any ad budget. We had a brand new brand without an established audience. We didn't tell anyone what our event was about, nor did we strategize about who we should invite or not invite, nor did we sell at the end of the event. And our results, so far beyond what I have seen anyone else in the online business industry report. And it was our very first time launching. And yet, we were able to turn a $200 marketing budget, which by marketing, I mean the cost of the invitations to attend, into $5,832 in revenue. That is a 2,816% increase on our investment. It kind of blows Grant Cardone's whole 10X method out of the water. And we didn't even push on any pain points or use manipulative sales tactics or NLP. We didn't follow scripts or strategies either. Instead, I channeled it all. I stepped aside, turned the volume way down on my ego, and let the consciousness that comes from the part of my brain that doesn't believe in limits take center stage. And I proceeded to tell my story in rhyme and fiction. I actually ended up writing a book and turning it into a short film, like a choose your own adventure experience. And it is hands down the best thing I have ever created in my life. And the process of channeling it was a spiritual experience that I literally don't have words to describe. All of that to say, we created these results our very first try. Now, side note, if you're curious about experiencing what I called the non-event of the season yourself, just shoot us an email at hellogoodbye@debbcobb.com with the subject line, I'm in, Deb sent me. And you can see so yourself. It is still the first version, and so it's not perfectly polished yet, so keep that in mind. But please do fill out the survey at the end and tell us what you loved and what you'd love more of moving forward. So the next time we do launch it, it'll be even better thanks to you. Okay, so by now you're probably curious about the results that they keep bragging about. So obviously, turning $200 into $5,832 in revenue is pretty incredible. But what's even more incredible are the results that we saw from our email campaign. So to just give you a brief overview of what those results are, and then next I'll leave you with 3 steps I follow when I want to manifest beyond what I could manifest of my own accord. So An overview. We sent 50 personal invitations to people by snail mail. And yes, you can still mail things by hand. And I selected those to invite by personally going through every single one of my contacts and friend lists and asking for divine guidance on who to invite. These people were not selected based on anything other than my intuition. And I actually, to be honest, felt a little embarrassed mailing some of these invitations out because I hadn't talked to these people in years. But if I felt guided to, I swallowed my pride and I did it anyway. Now, out of those 50 invites, roughly 60% RSVP'd and said that they were going to attend. And of those who responded, they generated the other 34% who attended the non-event because I incentivized those who RSVP'd with the +1. And we also created a scavenger hunt, a game out of the entire thing. So all of that resulted in a 94% attendance rate. Not everyone attended live, but a good amount did. And of those who didn't, they watched the replay. So 94% of people who were on our list engaged and watched the replay or attended live. Now, our total email open rate was almost triple of what the industry average is, 83.7% for the total campaign. That's all of the emails that we sent combined. And according to MailChimp, my industry average, so marketing and advertising's open rate traditionally is 29.7%. And we had an 83.7% open rate. Our click-through rate was 18 times the industry standard, coming in at 43.36%. And according to MailChimp, the average click-through rate, meaning somebody clicks on a link in your email, is 2.3%. But our sales conversion is what matters most, right? Our conversion rate is 5 to 10 times the norm, depending on which figure you align with or you believe, right? So 10.6% of our email list bought, and our industry standard is 1 to 2%. So now if you want to reproduce these results yourself, you're in luck. I'm hosting a workshop and I'm looking for 20 to 30 brave guinea pigs who are willing to pay $144 for a 2-hour workshop where I will be walking you through how we did it and giving you access to all of my templates and my brain in exchange for feedback before we launch this to the masses later this year. I will teach you how we did what we did, and then you'll submit your launch ideas to us, and I will personally give you feedback before turning you loose to do it yourself. So what you don't need: a big list, a landing page, tech knowledge, a big team, a big ego, or a finished product. What you do need: a big heart, a passion for the people that you serve, a business or business idea that sells something, and an open mind. So if you want a ticket, they're first come, first serve. And we're going to pull those who purchase tickets to determine the best date and time for the workshop and go from there. So all of that to say, if you want in, you need to email us with the subject line golden ticket at hellogoodbye@debbcobb.com. And I'll be sharing that again at the end. So now for the moment you've been waiting for, right? 3 tangible steps so you can steal my manifestation process for yourself. Step 1, when I want to create, attract, or manifest something, I figure out what that thing is and why it's important that I have it. Now, my rule of thumb is that what I want to attract cannot be something I only want to prove my worthiness or heal any feeling of lack or inadequacy. Now, trigger warning, there's a reason why the higher your income, the more likely you are to commit suicide. This is a statistic found to be true in a 2022 study at the University of Washington in St. Louis, who disproved their own hypothesis that poverty would predict higher rates of suicide, when in fact, the highest group at risk is affluent white men over the age of 75. Now, money does not buy happiness, and whether you love him or hate him, I happen to love him. Jim Carrey had it right when he said, everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. Having overcome my own battle with suicide, low self-worth, and self-sabotage, I know for a fact that seeking external validation or things to fill the hole in your soul will most likely result in a bigger hole. Trying to manifest things for the sake of things usually fails or puts you on the manifestation hamster wheel where it is never enough. So first, figure out what you want and why. What validation are you looking for from manifesting or creating this thing. And if you find that you're trying to heal a feeling of not being good enough or to prove your worth to anyone but yourself, you'll see the best results if you pause and work on healing that and adjusting your manifestation goal to align with something that you actually love and will support your greater purpose or your dharma, or help others in your family or friends or clients to achieve their results first. And I know it's not sexy, but it's true that the more you heal your inner world, the more your outer world will resemble the one of your dreams. Second, the next step, and this is very important, I turn off my logical brain that tries to dictate the way to achieve what I want, and I ask for guidance from beyond the physical. Again, you can call it whatever you want. I call it God or spirit, but use the word that resonates most, right? And then I make a list of all of my possible next actions, and I ask for a sign so grand that I can't help but see it and know what my next step is, which is almost always what produces a sign, and almost always way easier than what I'd imagined and completely against the way my brain would have told me to go. In fact, my favorite saying, the odds are stacked against you, but you are not a statistic, came from my very first attempt at manifesting guidance before I had even heard of manifestation. I was 18 years old and pregnant at the time, going to high school half days as an at-risk student and working part-time as a secretary in the afternoon for a mortgage company. I told one of my coworkers I had decided not to go to college after all. I didn't think I could pull off college and a baby when I'd barely made it through my senior year. Now, I remember very vividly rolling my chair from my desk to the filing cabinet so I wouldn't have to walk. I was actually wearing slippers at this point because my old shoes no longer fit and I didn't have the money for new shoes. So I was rolling across the floor and I was wondering if not going to college was the right decision. I had really wanted to get a degree in psychology to become a psychologist someday to help others or figure out what was quote unquote wrong with me, right? When I heard the same voice from my near death experience, and I explained that in the last episode if you haven't listened, but I heard the same voice and it said ever so softly, the odds are stacked against you, Debbie, but you are not a statistic. One of many reasons I believe it is a mistake to dismiss the voices in your head as just wishful thinking at best or delusions of grandeur at worst. Whether or not something is real or only in your head is pretty much impossible to prove. How do you prove something exists outside of your brain when the only way to experience anything is with your brain, right? That said, there are ways to ground the guidance that you're receiving into the 3D so you can be fairly certain that your guidance is real, but that's another topic for another day. Finally, step 3, I listen. I listen and I take action on what the voice in my head guides me to, regardless of how crazy or risky it may seem to myself or anyone else. Just like the time in 2012 when I quit my job in corporate retail management. I was working at Target and I had barely 3 months savings and no leads for another job. I was obsessed with Pat Flynn's passive income podcast at the time, and I had developed an interest in personal development and online business. It was there I discovered Amy Porterfield and Laura Roeder, and I decided to launch a career in marketing. But nobody wanted to give someone a chance who had no experience in advertising or marketing and a degree in philosophy, right? Several dozen applications and hundreds of hours of job searching later, I was at the very bottom of my bank account. And I mean, very bottom. When I decided to take a leap, take a risk, and try again and apply for an entry level position at a local advertising agency. Now, I didn't expect to hear back because, again, I hadn't heard back as of that time. And I was actually considering going back to work in the service industry as a bartender when I received a call from that advertising company's hiring manager, who, lo and behold, had also recently quit working as a manager for Target. And because someone had taken a chance on them without them having experience, they convinced the owner of the agency that they should take a chance on me. I received my very first paycheck just a day or two after I drained all of my savings and overdrafted my bank account. And thus my career in online marketing was born. I had to start at the very bottom as a secretary, and I took a $25,000 pay cut, and I had to drive well over an hour each way from the small town of Mooresville, Indiana, which is 20 minutes south of Indianapolis, all the way to Westfield, Indiana, which is a town about 20 minutes north of Indianapolis. And it was pretty rough, but I got my foot in the door. And I got paid to teach myself everything I could about email and digital marketing. And when their current writer left, just a few months after I had started, I volunteered to fill in and I took over the task of writing all of their current client email campaigns on the side while completing my admin duties. When my emails became our highest producing lead source, I convinced my boss to invest in a social media marketing course. Digital marketing was still fairly new back then, and our clients relied on traditional forms of advertising like Yellow Pages, direct mail, and Valpak, right? And thus, a brand new revenue stream and department was born. And a few months later, I was working from home half the week and getting paid to learn the very skill I now use in my own online business. And the rest is, as they say, history. The moral of my story: your intuition is not going to make sense, and that's the point. Your family, friends, and coworkers may think you're batshit crazy, and that's a good sign. If you are aligned with taking a leap and pivoting your life to follow what lights you up, it doesn't matter whether or not it looks good on paper. All that matters is that you are following your own inner compass and actually living the life that you want to live. It might not be easy in the beginning. It might be going against everything that you've been taught up to this point, and even against things that you've held sacred in the past. But I can promise you this: it will be worth it. The alternative is to live the life you don't want. And then what's the point? So, what do you think? Was blindly following my intuition to quit my job reckless or genius? Have you ever done the opposite of what was logical only to have it work out? I would love to know. All of my love. And remember, you are indeed a spiritual being having a physical experience. You are infinitely loved and supported by the entire cosmos, to collapsing timelines and co-creating your version of happily ever after, our new heaven on earth. Because the odds may be stacked against you, but you are not a statistic. We'll see you next time. If you'd like to attend the Anti-Launch Launch Workshop, which is a real workshop and not a webinar, and learn exactly how we achieved over 2,800% increase on our investment without ads or social media or an established brand or established audience, or even telling people what the event was about or what we were launching, and draft your own version, email us with the subject line Golden Ticket at hellogoodbye@debbcobb.com. That's HELLOGOODBYE at DEBBCOBB.com. I hope to see you there.